Hi everyone, my name is Tyler and I'm here to help you get into your new 40k army. 40k as a hobby can be very expensive to get into, but my goal with this series is to help you get a full army going without having to break the bank. Before we dive into the list, let's talk about some basic rules that we're going to be using for the list building process here. Our first goal is going to be to keep it affordable and utilize box deals. For everything that we're going to be looking at today, we're going to be looking at it from an MSRP value from Games Workshop themselves. Now, I don't recommend buying everything MSRP from Games Workshop. Often, local hobby stores, eBay, Amazon, things of that nature will have much better deals for the kits that I'm about to show you. Our second goal is that we're going to be making the list in steps, starting at 500 points and working our way up to 1,000 points, 1,500 points, and 2,000 points. Our third rule is we're going to be avoiding Forge World and Finecast. Many Forge World models are often very pricey for the points that they provide you on the table, and the resin used can be hard to work with, especially for beginners. As far as Finecast goes, I just don't think that they're quite as high quality as the plastic models that you can get otherwise. Our fourth goal is to aim to make lists with decent competitive viability. We're going to be trying to make lists that can do well at casual tournaments, in your games with friends, or maybe even get you some wins at major tournaments. Our fifth and final rule is the most important one. Just because I don't mention a model in my list, it doesn't mean that it isn't good. The most important thing that you can do is collect models that you think are cool. There's an entire side of the hobby that has nothing to do with playing, and if you don't like the models you're painting and building, you're not going to get the most out of this hobby. Today we're going to be talking about the Adeptus Custodes. The Custodes are the enhanced versions of Space Marines created from genetic alchemy and testing on the finest soldiers the Imperium has. You can think of them as the most elite of the elite soldiers. They are the ultimate guardians of the Emperor's Palace and the Golden Throne, with only 10,000 allowed to be in their forces at any given time. They are partnered up very often with the Sisters of Silence, an all-female force who are able to stave off demons and psychers by simply existing in the same room as one. The Custodes not only guard the most sacred relics of Terra and all of the Imperium, but they also make sure to protect all of the most important citizens of the Imperium. Anyone that they believe will be pivotal in creating the Emperor's will is considered a top priority target to be protected. So why should you be considering collecting Custodes as an army? Well, first off, they are the single most cost-efficient army in the entire game to purchase, with an average of over 4 points per dollar when bought at MSRP. This means that you could very easily get to 2,000 points of army with almost any combination of Custodes boxes for under $600. Their combat patrol is insane, having, in my opinion, the best Custodes character in the game, the 2 units that you want in most every Custodes army, and a solid additional unit that does see decent amounts of play. The army is also incredibly durable, with more wounds on their models on average, an army-wide 2-up save, 4-up invulns, and high toughness on their units. Makes it very easy for you to make slight positioning mistakes and not be punished as hard as some other armies might be able to be punished. They're also a very powerful melee army that have access to fighting first, which lets them out melee other melee armies on top of their already powerful defensive tools and utility. But even as a powerful melee army, they still have respectable shooting. They have a lot of 2 damage weapons, which tend to be a very good profile to have, but it is kind of held back a little bit by lack of volume of fire and generally being pretty close to strength 4 across the army. They are also, at the end of the day, just the most elite army in the game that is not a Imperial Knight or Chaos Knight army. There really isn't anything out there that is more elite on average than they are. They also recently got their codex, which is going to give you options for several different detachments that did also recently get some pretty nice buffs. And if hobbying isn't the greatest part of the game for you, well, you can just buy a can of metallic spray paint and your army is basically 90% of the way done to being painted. There are some very glaring issues, though, for collecting the Custodes that might make you want to stay away from them. First and foremost, they are probably one of the only armies that does actually require Forge World models for its most competitive lists. There are a lot of different ways that this can take place, whether it's as a Caladius Grav tank or Venatari, but most Custodes lists have some level of Forge World, partly because the actual range of Custodes is so small, and partly because most of their good shooting seems to be locked behind Forge World. Custodes models will also often have individual costs that are higher than some armies' entire units. The cost of a Custodian Warden is about the same cost as 10 Gretchen. This means that it can make the secondary game a lot harder, and means that you might lose out a lot of combat power trying to hold points for objectives because everything that you do with Custodes is a commitment. They can also struggle a lot against devastating wounds since they are more easily able to bypass the defenses of the Custodes. Doesn't really matter if you have a 2-up save and a 4-up invuln and T6 if you get hit with something that is 2 damage dev wounds and, just goes through anyways. They're also pretty vulnerable against powerful shooting armies, since a lot of the Custodes' strength is ultimately in their melee. Yes, their durability is still good, but if you have a lot of long-range shooting firing at you, your melee isn't going to matter nearly as much. Their codex is also just widely considered the worst of the edition. While it did recently get some buffs that did make the army at least viable again, there really isn't a lot of leeway with build diversity at the time of my recording. But what I will say on that front is that if you don't enjoy the Custodes Codex, I have released a homebrewed version of the Codex prior to the release of Pariah Nexus that offers alternative playstyles for casual games. This is things like giving them back some of their dev wound protection. It's things like making their synergy with sisters better, fixing up some of the stratagems, giving a detachment where their bikes are actually playable and good and feel like a powerful unit. So give that a shot. Now, each list that I have for you today is going to be from the perspective of the Shield Host attachment, as it's the most affordable to get into and the only one that is currently putting up competitive results. While I am sure that there is decent enough playability in the alternate attachments and that you could absolutely be fine for a very casual game, the Sisters of Silence are simply too costly to buy that I'm not going to be including Null Maiden Vigil, and there just isn't any workable data for me to work with for the other two detachments. While I do want to make sure that you are able to play as you like, I will still want to make sure that you are getting something that is at least somewhat competitively viable so that you can have a good time when you show up to tables. The army rule for the Custodes is Martial Kata. Every single unit in your army, when they're chosen to fight, are going to pick a Kata, and that's what they're going to get for the rest of that activation. It's either going to be sustained hits 1, or it's going to be lethal hits. Now, this used to be a much more interesting army rule because you had the option of picking a -1 to hit option, and it was for your entire army. But with the way that it works now, it's really just a question of math. If you are wounding your opponent on a 2 or a 3, you take sustained hits. If you are wounding them on a 5 or a 6, you take lethal hits. There really isn't much leeway to be really interested in the decision making here. The detachment rule for the Shield Host is going to be Martial Mastery. At the start of the battle round, pick either crits on 5s or +1 AP, and cool, you have that across your entire army. It means that your lethal hits are going to be more consistent, your sustained hits are going to be more sustained, or you can hit them a little bit harder when you actually get the attacks through. It's nice that it's been changed this way because before it was very weak, but now it's actually okay. As far as the lists go, every single one of these Custodes lists is going to be starting off the exact same way, where we're going to go and pick up a Combat Patrol of Custodes. Yes, like I said, in the pros, you can do this with pretty much any combination of boxes of Custodes that you want and still be within a $600 budget, but the Combat Patrol is just phenomenal. For the list itself, you're going to be running the Blade Champion, you're going to be putting him in a unit with 5 Custodian Wardens, and you're going to be taking a Shield Captain in Alaris Terminator armor with Guardian Spear, and he's just going to go be a solo unit. The Shield Captain in Alaris Terminator armor is great as his own solo unit because you can very easily turn all of the damage that's coming into him to 1, which means that suddenly even the tank killers are going to struggle to go through him. The anti-infantry weapons are going to struggle against his toughness and his saves, and it just makes him an incredible fridge to just throw at your opponent and say, here, deal with it. The Blade Champion going with the Custodian Wardens is because the Custodian Wardens are going to get that -1 to wound if they have a leader who is leading them, and the Blade Champion's advance and charge for the unit means that the Custodian Wardens can be much faster on the battlefield. Now, the thing is I think that at 500 points you really are doing Custodes a huge disservice, as this box is also going to lead very well into those 1,000-point armies. Speaking of which, at the 1,000 points for the 3 lists that I have for you today, we need to buy nothing. The Custodes Combat Patrol will get you all the way up to 1,000 points because of the flexibilities that the units have with being leaders versus being actual units to be led. That list at 1,000 points is going to look like a Blade Champion with the Auric Mantle to give him a couple of extra wounds, the Shield Captain with Guardian Spear and from the Hall of the Armories to make him hit a little bit harder. We've got a Shield Captain in Alaris Terminator armor who has the Panopta specs, which is going to turn off armor saves, which is very good for the Terminator units since they have more shooting than the rest of the regular Custodes. We also had 5 extra points, so why not spend it? For the battle line, we've got the Custodian Guard with their Guardian Spears. They are going to reroll all wounds on targets that are on objectives and are pretty solid at being a good killy force. And then we've got the 5 Custodian Wardens who are going to absorb a lot of damage. At 1,500 points is where we can start to see a little bit of divergence. For the first style that I have, I'm going to be getting you to 2,000 points as cheaply as possible so you have as much leeway afterwards to buy whatever you want. This means that all we have to do at 1,500 points is go pick up a second Combat Patrol and we're done. At 1,500 points, we do have to take out the Alaris Terminator Captain, which is sad, but he'll be back. And instead, we're going to be bringing in a Blade Champion with Panopta specs, so that whatever unit he's leading can be a little bit better at their shooting. 2 5-man Custodian Guard units, 2 5-man Warden units, and 1 5-man brick of Alaris Custodians. The Wardens can do a perfectly fine job with the Blade Champions leading them of getting into the fray and soaking up damage. The Custodian Guard can follow it up as that kind of second wave of hits. And the Custodians that are in the Terminator armor are going to be able to just be kind of threats to drop in wherever you need them to be. Alternatively, you put 1 Blade Champion in with the Wardens, 1 Champion in with the Guardians, and then that second Guardian unit can just go and kill pretty much whatever you need to with its advance and charge. Now to round out this first style of list, at 2,000 points, we need to buy nothing. We already have everything that we're going to need. Now it's not going to be the greatest army that we can run with Custodes, but hey, you know what? It'll get you straight to 2,000 points so you can start exploring the game mode at its actual maximum point level that most people are going to be playing. Now, like I said, this list is going to look goofy, but it's just to get you here. It's going to be 2 Blade Champions, 3 Shield Captains with Guardian Spears because you're going to be taking multiple character models out from the regular Guard and Warden units. We're going to have 2 Captains in Alaris Terminator armor. One of them will have Panopta specs for his shooting unit, and the other one is just going to be going in regular. The 2 Custodian Guard units are both going to be 4-mans because we had to pull Shield Captains out of those units. One of the Custodian Wardens is going to be a 4-man, and the other one can be a 5-man. Now, this list is going to struggle with a lot of aspects of the game. It's not going to be great at handling things like holding your backline, doing secondaries. It can be okay at secondaries if you wind up taking the Alaris Terminators out of one of the Custodian Terminator units, but at the end of the day, this is going to really exemplify that problem that I was talking about where your secondary game is weak. But it's also the absolute cheapest that you're going to get to any 2,000 point army, so, you know, pros and cons. So let's take a step back and make some purchases that are going to help us fix that secondary game problem and really feel like our army is that elite soldiers that we want them to be. At 1500 points, we're still going to be picking up that Custodes Combat Patrol for the second copy, and we're going to be picking up 1 box of Sisters of Silence. With a much more balanced list right off the get-go, it's going to be the 2 Blade Champions. One of them will still have the Panopta specs. We're going to have 1 4-man Custodian Guard unit. We're going to have 1 5-man Custodian Guard unit. We're going to have that 5 Alaris Custodians, the 10 Custodian Wardens, and the 4 Prosecutors. 1 Prosecutor unit is about the same price as a Custodian Guard, so we can very easily fit these in without having to really change much about this. But it is going to feel substantially better because now you don't have some 300-point unit that's sitting back and holding a home field objective, and instead you have it as this 40-point unit. It really is going to unlock a lot more of your army by having this cheap unit. Then, at 2,000 points, what we're going to do is we're going to go and pick up a Cowardice Assassin to help us make the secondary game even better. And then we're also going to be picking up Lord Inquisitor Kyria Draxus. As far as the list itself, it's going to be the 1 regular Blade Champion, 1 with an Auric Mantle. We're going to have 1 Shield Captain with a Guardian Spear and from the Hall of Armories, and we're going to have that Alaris Terminator Captain with Panopta specs. Same stuff as you're probably used to seeing by now. We've got the Custodian Guards, the Custodian Terminators are going to be fine, the Wardens are going to be there, the Prosecutors there. But with the allied units, the Cowardice Assassin is a great secondary tool for the army, thanks to her ability to be redeployed mid-game and have a lone op, meaning that she can very easily teleport around the board to do things like containment or any kind of secondary action that needs to be handled, like sabotage. And Kyria Draxus is one of those units that isn't seen in every Custodes list, but I think that she is one of the best models that you can run with Custodes. With the reroll wounds from a Custodian Guard unit that she'll be leading, she will fire off 4 anti-infantry 4-up dev wound shots, coming out to around 6 mortal wounds per shooting, without including her second gun. If she's firing on Xenos infantry, then you're going to get closer to 6 to 8 mortals. The 18-inch lone op on the unit that she's leading is fine, but it's not really the most important thing, as you are really bringing her for the buffs that she gets from the Custodes, more so than the buffs that she is giving to them. The final list that I've got for you today is going to be starting with those 2 combat patrols and the Sisters of Silence that we picked up in the previous 1500 point list. With over $200 left after buying those 2 combat patrols and the prosecutors, we really could go any number of directions. We could buy a 3rd combat patrol and get great value by having 3 Blade Champions and all the Wardens and Custodian Guard you could ever need. We could go buy Trajan Valoris, a Blade Champion, a Cowardice Assassin, and a box of Witch Seekers to make our secondary game feel even better and really feel like we have good leaders for all of our units. We could go buy 3 boxes of Sisters of Silence and actually be able to run 5 units in total, since they come in boxes of 5, but run in units of 4. But you know what? Screw all that. We're going to go buy Canis Rex, because big robots are cool, and our refusal to buy Forge World does leave our shooting a little bit weak, which Canis Rex can help shore up. Now, the one thing that you will run into with this list is that you don't have room to fit all of the Terminators, but that's kind of okay. Instead, what we're going to be doing is the Alaris Terminators are both just going to be solo units like they were at that 500 point game, where they're just going to be a bunch of wounds that is hard for your opponent to kill, and then probably get some actions done, and then is still alive on the next turn to do more stuff for you. The Canis Rex is just going to be a solid shooting platform, and you know what's nice about him is even if your opponent kills him, they don't score any points for Assassinate or Bring It Down until they kill the guy that pops out of Canis Rex, who is Lone Op. This means that Canis Rex can actually be your backline holder. He dies, pops out, and just continues to hold your backline. Or you can put him up into the mid board and have him pop out onto a little side objective outside of the middle, where you're going to be contesting with most of your actual Blade Champion and Wardens and Guardians and whatnot. And that's going to be everything that I have for you today. Like I said, that last list, you could take it any number of directions that you wanted to. I just chose to go this direction because I felt like it made sense to want to include some kind of big shooting platform option for anyone who is interested in that kind of style. But I think that Custodes are in a much better place now. Yes, they do still have some reliance on Forge World, but that's only for the very tippy top competitive lists. And I think that these lists will get you at least pretty far in a more casual tournament. And who knows, we might even be able to see something like this do pretty well at a GT in the upcoming weeks as people kind of play around with the different ideas for Custodes and really try to get a grasp on them. It should come as a shock to no one that Custodes are going to hold their place right at the very top of the tier list as being the most affordable army in the game. Big shout out to all of my channel supporters who help make these videos possible, such as Comrade Chin, Alexander Thomas, and everyone else who's been generous enough to support me. If you would like to try and help out the channel, please consider the links in the description where you can either check out the Amazon affiliate link or go support me on Ko-fi. Thank you all for watching.